One, two, three. Hey everybody, welcome back. Chalkboard history bonus episode with Pat Landrum. So we talked a little bit about an event that you're going to be doing at Carnton, but let's talk about living history. Let's talk about living history as you see it, living history things that you've been involved in. But I think the lead into this is a question that I've never put the gear on.
I got you to come to Shiloh.
Got me to go. I've seen some really cool stuff. Yeah. Like I was at the 140th of Franklin. I was at Shiloh for the 140th. But I've never put the gear on. It's just never been my thing. But I've always been interested in it. And a question that we get all the time is, when are we going to have another reenactment? And we haven't had a reenactment in Franklin really since the 150th, and so that's about 10 years ago. And I think living history programs are, I think they're just more educational. I think people it isn't always about entertainment. It's actually about learning something. So I think that's one of the things I appreciate about what you've done through the years. So let's talk about why do you put the gear on, and then B, what do you think about, this world that exists between reenacting combat and being honest and sincere about history and what you're trying to get people to understand, or maybe what you're trying to understand.
I started in 1989, so I was 5 years old. So I really didn't have it was an opportunity at that point for me.
What are you, like little Johnny Clem, the drummer boy at Shiloh?
My dad and my mom were both into history, and like mom would bring us to historic sites. I mean, were divorced.
Wait a second. So you were doing this when you were 5, which means you were doing this before Professor Ricky was even born?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I actually remember the professor when he was little, because his mom and dad.
When he was just a little tot.
Yeah, when he's wee Joey.
When he was wee Joey.
So they got me involved in it, and it was an opportunity for me to spend time with my dad and, go to sites. And
so you said your mom and dad are divorced?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, just like mine.
Yeah.
No wonder we turned out like we did,
were,
huh?
It's funny. I don't really have any
harsh and, not a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
Like,
just cold. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Get
out of my way. Get off my lawn.
I was telling Brian DeRoche when I was driving here today.
He'll never get divorced. Because
he's not married.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I told him, he's like, how do you think it's going to go with Eric? I'm like, man, I was like, Eric and I arguing with each other is literally like the same person arguing with the same person. And,
yep.
He laughed, and he's, got that ideal. But, with living history, I got, about the time I was like 17 or 18, I started going from like the traditional, like, sleeping in a tent and having a cooler to doing like a different approach to it and doing campaign style. And about the time I was 19 years old, I met the former lead ranger at Vicksburg, the interpretive ranger Rick Martin, and he actually is the one that taught me how to write like interpretive plans. Mm-hmm. And I was on the path to be a seasonal with them and go on and be a full-time ranger, and then that changed. But I just kind of took a look at what I was doing on the weekends, and we would participate in some combat things in the campaigner side of the hobby, but it's always like scaled down, because really after the 140th, you start seeing this drop in attendance. You've got 2 wars going on at this point in time, and guys aren't wanting to come back and do this on the weekend.
Right. So the actual veterans don't want to recreate combat.
Well, most of the guys that grew up around, and my dad included, were all guys that, served in Vietnam, or during that era. And then, guys that were in the Gulf, and then, they were still involved. And then you get to, 9/11, and that all changed. I've seen, and you were here for the event here, and the 140th, there were probably 15,000 reenactors here, and now
it was wild.
Yeah, it was wild, and that's still one of the most memorable ones for me. But
I can still see the Hardy Corps flag kind of bobbing up over this like rise, and I can feel the hair on my arm standing in, because you could not only see it, you could start to hear it and feel it. It was really wild.
And that's really why I do it, because and I get it, like some of the staff that are here now, like I don't come up to the houses like I used to and give you a hard time, but like having been on both sides of that bench, like I understand that like the staff is going, oh, reenactor, because you never know what's going to happen. And for me, because I had that kind of NPS tutelage and like an ideal of what I wanted to do, it's really about education, because like you're a published historian, and you got to see that Hardy Corps come up over a rise. You're not just reading about it in a book. You get the visual aid of something like oh my God, like that's what it looked like. Like I've gotten to do field artillery and get up in the middle of the night and do stable call with horses, and like you can get immersed into it enough that the stuff that I've spent the majority of my life reading about, like I have some understanding about it. Like
okay, so what's the most realistic what's the most realistic situation you've ever been in? Where you were like, oh wow, this is wild, this is crazy, I wasn't expecting this.
The one, it's there's two, and one, I don't really do combat related events anymore, but I did go up to Gettysburg for the 150th, and they did the assault on Culp's Hill at night, and you can look at YouTube videos and stuff on it, because somebody was wearing a GoPro, and like we're sitting in the woods, and Brian DeRoche and I got separated from one of our buddies. Like he was there one minute and then he's not. Like it was just this real intense, like I almost swore on the internet, and I told Joey I wasn't going to do that. Yeah, but it was this like holy shit moment, and like pull up the clip, and it's insane.
Yeah.
How loud that was, because you're in a woodlot, like looking up at the Federals, just like they had it at Culp's Hill, and like the acoustics were deafening.
Right.
Like I was sitting there yelling at the top of my lungs to try and find where Tyler went, and like I couldn't hear myself. And the other one is like completely switched from that. It's Confederate Memorial Park in Marbury, Alabama has a recreated winter quarters or camp, and we'll go there, and like I've got up in the morning and opened pushed the shutters off of my hut and sat there and watched like a camp come to life, and just the acoustics of that, guys coughing or joking, the musicians starting to play, and it's like I've gotten to see, smell, and touch all the stuff you read about in books. And that's kind of what we want to do with programs, is like we don't want to hide off in the woods and do all this work in detail. We want to do things that materialistically haven't been done. Like, I mean, we had shirting made for this event that hasn't been recreated, I think, since the war. I actually worked with Family Heirloom Weavers to do that. And, we've had proper uniform cloth cut and all this stuff just for this one weekend. And it's just, a lot of work goes into this, and we want to be able to show people, like, this is what this army looked like on November 30th, 1864, what they look like marching in here.
Okay, so what's the I ask this question all the time. I used to do it with Joseph. I do it with people that I talk to in groups. Sometimes if I take a tour, I do it with staff. Why does any of this matter? Like, where are we headed with living history, reenactment, books, interpretation? The 160th is going to be in a few weeks, and then there's going to be the 160th plus another day and a week, and then pretty soon it's the spring. What does it mean?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't. For me, like, I used to put so much into history and reenacting and everything like that, and now I've got 2 kids, and like my daughter likes coming out to it, but like, my son's 4. He likes terrorizing Joey if we come here. He doesn't like, he's not there yet. But I don't know. I mean, for me, it was always just, and maybe it's because I'm at like the tail end of one generation. Like I'm technically a millennial, but I grew up around a lot of, Gen X people. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the ideals were, because like you and I grew up in a different world, to me. And I don't know if people are gonna, have a respect for history or anything like that, or what the approach to the craft is going to be. Because it's the interpretation and the research and presentation styles for, well, Rippavilla certainly, but I mean they're different now than they were when I was working for you 13 years ago at the same houses. The interpretive and the art and science of it shifted. And, you guys are one of the ones that were kind of at the forefront about that. We used to do tours and you never talked about the slaves. Well, yeah. And that's true. Yeah. And it's just an evolution in a craft. And I don't know, where that's going to go, going forward.
That reminds me of something that happened at the 150th. This was, we haven't talked about this. Your group is our official living history unit. We don't use anybody else because I've personally had some very odd and I think unprofessional interactions with various individuals and groups, and I'll never forget on the 150th. It was a 2-day event, and the second day got rained out, and the first day was really cool. But there was a guy that came in and he was fussing. He'd taken a house tour, and he was just all bent out of shape about the fact that we talked about slavery. And I guess, I'd either had too much coffee or not enough. And I was like, dude, listen, the only thing missing out of your little campsite is about 3 or 4 black guys. Because, there were slaves all over these Confederate camps. And I said, you're complaining to me about authenticity.
Yeah, they were in the third. Yeah. There's 4 or 5 of them listed in the back in the third book.
And then that's part of it, too. When I'm asking what does it matter and where is it going, and maybe it's why I've been uncomfortable about, reenacting combat, because inevitably there's always this applause or there's a hoorah if they hear Dixie played or something. But I don't know that we can ever get to it. It's what I always like. We can't. Do we ever really get to the reality? And I don't know. I mean, if you're reenacting or doing a living history of Rev War stuff or World War II, it's like there is a line you probably can't ever cross.
Yeah.
But that's why I've always appreciated the work that you've done, because I think it's about as close to authentic as reenacting something can be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a change, and I do think it's generational. I mean, I know the guys that were older than me were really into it, and then there was your generation, and I don't see the 20-year-olds putting on the gear.
We've got, in the independent rifles, we've got a pretty young group. I mean, there's a group out of Missouri that'll be at the event. I think the oldest guy, and the 2 guys that run the group are 25, 22, and one's 27, I think.
Right.
I mean, they're the young, and they're hard at it.
Really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to add.
But I haven't been, the last kind of mainstream big event I went to was Chickamauga, and I was there for a day.
Well, and I was going to add that I don't see the young people putting it on the way they used to, but the ones that do it really well. Now, anything that we do like this, there's always some moment where we can riff on somebody or make fun of somebody. Yeah. So, there was a rumor that there was going to be a big national 160th Franklin event, and I remember getting a couple of phone calls and emails about that. So, what happened?
I put the dates for our living history, and I had a bunch of people that were like, we're not gonna come. We're gonna support the 160th national. And I'm like, they don't have land.
Yep.
And the group, I have a lot of respect for the Atlanta Inc. group. They've done really well.
They did the 150th for us,
and I know that they're a preservation driven group too. They do donate, and I think that they had some issues just locating land, because in Middle Tennessee, if you have nice land, I mean, it's worth a premium. I mean, you can't just, where we had the 140th, which is underneath Rose.
Southern Springs.
Yeah. So I mean, the main battle area is right next to Southern Springs. Like if you come out of Brown Stand and that road stand, that's where everything was. But there's nowhere to park. What Murray County owns the rest of the land over
Yep.
here that was used during like the 96 event and everything.
And that's the conversation that I had with two people. I was like, unless you're going to probably get out into western Williamson County or western Murray County, you're going to be hard pressed. And even if you get out there, that's going to be a logistical problem because you're going to be out where the road network's not really good.
Well, even logistically trying to use the sites that we used back in 2004, and trying to get that many people. Spring Hill has changed.
Yep,
it's not.
totally.
It's not what it was 21 years ago.
Well, it was like 12
ago.
or 13,000 people, and now it's 55,000.
And then trying to put them coming down like Denning Lane to get to where the park. I mean, it's just like it didn't make any sense.
Well, and for me, I know even with the 150th, I love the first day, but the second day when we had the rain out and all the guys just started peeling out, which I understand. But then I got a whole line of people who'd pre-purchased tickets and they're screaming at us because they want their money back, and I'm just like, I'm trying to run a historic site. I'm not running a concert venue,
Yeah.
And that's why I think what's going to happen here with your group at Carnton right after the 160th is going to be really great. So last thing, what's the craziest thing you ever saw? The thing at some event or some place you were where you're like, oh my God, did that just really happen?
I saw a horse-drawn team actually go over a set of earthworks, he was coming and went over a 4.5 foot section of earthworks. That was probably the most terrifying thing I think I've done because I've watched because I'm sitting here watching this guy ride on a 4-up team, 4 horses pulling a 3-inch gun, and I'm like, he's gonna go around, and there was
he just jumped it?
Yeah, with the gun. So because there was an area where he could ride over it and it just rolled, and I think he thought he was going to that and then he was probably going, oh no, when the horse's legs are just kicked. I mean, it was scary. That was at Selma, Alabama. Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, that's probably the weirdest thing I think I've seen.
I just thought of this because I mentioned it briefly at the start of our other video. So, we probably shouldn't go too far with this, but when you're doing this event, you're going to be portraying this time right after the Battle of Franklin, which at that point will be 30 days after the presidential election of 1864. And I've already had to remind a couple of people this morning. There have been presidential elections, for how long has it been now? 230 years. And we're not even 24 hours removed from this one. And think about that election. I was thinking about it actually yesterday. This guy and the other guy, and nobody really knew even 30 days later what was going to happen. What was going to happen to the United States. And I just think that we're incredibly lucky to 160 years later to still live in the United States because for all of its imperfections,
Yeah, I mean, we all hit the genetic lottery being able to live here because even if you go back to like the seed of the first election, and as great as a hero as everybody states Washington was, there was probably somebody that when he won was going, oh, we're screwed now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's going to be a king.
Yeah.
Somebody said to me earlier, we just really need to get rid of the two-party system. And I said, there's pretty much been a two-party system since George Washington left office.
Did you see the video I posted yesterday of the Simpsons clip when Homer comes out and rips off and it's 2 aliens? It's like, well, I think I'm going to vote for the third party. It's like, go ahead, throw your vote away.
Right.
Sorry, I just hit the table and I think I caused you harm.
So, yeah, it's I often go back to 1860 or 1864, and we have elections are contentious, but sometimes the world that envelopes the election is very different. And I thought about where we were in 1864, where we were in 1944, where we were in 1968. And, you've heard me say this now for months and months and months and months, that we are not as divided as a lot of people say that we are, and we've been in way worse circumstances. We've just got to sometimes stop being so pissed off about inane things and people that we've never met.
Yeah, I mean,
chill out, man.
I don't think that, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump didn't get up this morning and go, I wonder what Landrum's doing right now.
Yeah,
I
right,
mean, that's
right.
like, and that's, everybody uses this like we're in the, we're always in the worst of the best of something. Like, even after 9/11, I remember, for me, it was like, this is the most patriotic time that I've lived through. But, like, I don't think it was any better or any worse than what happened during Pearl Harbor or anything like that. And that's, that's kind of like the tone here. Is the country divided now? Yeah. Is it as divided as it was in 1968? Probably not. And that's everybody's got it's like the interpretation of the war. It's like everybody's got this little grip on it, and they just want to look at what's in their hands, not like the big scope of our country's history.
And I also was thinking yesterday, I dragged myself in because I was, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I finally dragged myself in there about 3 o'clock yesterday and cast my vote. And it seems I every time I go in, I think, wow, this is freaking cool that we get to do this still. All these years later, and I don't think we should ever lose sight of that this country, 160 years removed from the thing that almost destroyed us, remains a beacon of hope and opportunity. And I'm not, me, I'm not some pie in the sky idealist like, there's going to be happy songs all day long, but God, this is still a great country.
Yeah, and there's people always bring up the fact that there's patriots buried on foreign soil that gave us the right to do that act. But there are
also patriots buried right here.
Yeah, there are people buried right here that were doing it. There were women that marched for their right to vote.
Yep.
There were, people of all races, colors, and creed marching, getting attacked by dogs, sprayed by hoses, so they could vote, and not just them, but their children and their grandchildren. And people, the thing that I don't really care how somebody votes, the people that have the right and don't do it is what's wrong with the country. Like you've been posting like the statistics for people under 40 that vote, and it's just like, man, you have no idea the blood that people have poured to have the right to get in that ballot box.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter about Trump or Kamala because they're part of the two-party system, but people have literally died, so people have the right to do that, and they don't vote.
But that's an interesting part of the civics equation, too, is sometimes American apathy kind of bleeds out in different ways, and there's probably a reason why that demographic didn't. And that has to be addressed, too, because eventually they're not going to be under 40. They're going to be our age, and they're going to have kids, but it's all fascinating. So, it's another example of why we do this, because I think our history still impacts us. The past bleeds into the present, and this present, I mean, there's something coming down the road 20 years from now. Who knows what it'll be?
Yeah, and I was about to say, I'm sure Nat Chair's never sat in his house and thought that, people would be talking about him, but he was a little bit of a narcissist, so he probably did think that they would be. But like John McGavick probably never sat in his house and, looking at a cemetery in the back and being like, I'm going to be remembered for this. It's just kind of, I think that for me, like, I don't have books that are published. Like, I'm just gonna be one of those guys that lives my life and fades away.
You heard me say earlier, I wish I could live 100 years.
Yeah.
Because I want to write about this time. Like the way that I'm writing right now for this new book I'm working on about the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s. Oh my God, it's so great. And somebody is going to be sitting there going, how did this happen? From 9/11 through this president and this war and this economic situation, they're going to go, oh my God, this first 25 years of the 21st century was crazy.
Yeah, my son was born 2 weeks before the COVID shut down. So Liz and I have always had it's like, how do you explain to him like the intense nature of like the first like 5 years of his life?
Never be able to.
Well, I think about it now, even after I just said it, I was born in 1983. think about everything that happened in the world that happened between 83 and 88.
So my youngest daughter doesn't remember 9/11. And I have reminded people now for years, anybody like her or younger, that's not their fault. So, but we do have to try and tell them what it was like, so at least they can get some understanding of it.
Yeah, we tried it. One of the projects Hannah had last year at school was to come back. She's in second then, was to come back and get Liz and I to tell her about 9/11. And that's just like, trying to have this conversation with a 8-year-old. She's like, "Do you remember?" She's like, "Where were you when it happened?" I was like, "I was in Harrison County Jail." That's not like we were on a field trip, so we were in a secured facility during a lockdown, and then
Wow.
because it's in the flight path for Gulfport Airport, so like we had to wait a time, and then we got to go back to school, and then they dismissed us. But I remember watching the aftermath of it in Brooklyn Pizzeria in Gulfport, Mississippi, with my friends, and we were all seniors in high school. And one of the guys that was there, ended up doing 2 combat tours, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan. And it was just, it's surreal to think about that.
And think about how he was viewed in 1864. How polarizing he was.
Mm-hmm.
But we never have heard him speak. We've never seen him move. No video. But he was real. And 150 years from now, somebody's going to be analyzing Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And he will be part of history. And that is, I still think, that one of the fascinating things about our country and our governmental apparatus and how unique we are and how we view our history, probably differently, I think, than maybe anyone else, because it is really and remains a very unique system of government and how we choose our leaders and then how we operate day to day. So, anything else? Any last closing comments?
No, can't think of anything.
Are you ready for the next election? It's only 4 years away.
Yeah, and we've got, it never stops in Tennessee.
How about if Congress passes a law that says presidential elections cannot begin until 120 days before the election? You know how healthy that might be for the country? That we can't announce, a year and a half early. We just condense it into, it's like saying a football game can't be 32 quarters. It only can be 4 quarters. Like, we set some rules to it.
Yeah. That would be putting rules on themselves, and Congress isn't really good about that.
Oh, that's right. All right. I think that's it. Are we all done?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good times? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.